Hey, everybody. Welcome to the next edition of the Expert Series. I wanted to introduce my friend Tim Ohai here and bring him in for a very deep discussion on the idea of coaching within your organization. And there's a lot of talk today about, is your organization coaching? How do you coach? When do you coach? Who gets the coaching? Who gives the coaching? Is it through AI? Is it through managers? And so I wanted to have this topic and go really deep on it because A, it's timely, and B, it's something that I think is a bit opaque for a lot of companies, and people don't always do it well. And so I want to bring in one of the best. And so maybe Tim, introduce yourself and tell everybody who you are.
Hey, aloha, everybody. My name is Tim Ohai, and I am in Hawaii. I'm from Hawaii. I'm part Hawaiian. That's why I give the aloha. And if you can see on the screen all the stuff behind me, it's from the heart. I will say that. Oh, man, to introduce myself, um, I help leaders and teams be the best versions of themselves. That's what I do. I work with them specifically around, especially strategic execution, because I find that that is the biggest blind spot we have in our organizations is nobody's been taught how to execute strategy. And that creates a lot of stress and a lot of dysfunction and a lot of unnecessary waste. But underneath that umbrella, something that is very near and dear to my heart sits coaching. And I've written on coaching. I did some extensive stuff with the American Society of Training and Development, which became the Association of Training and Development. You can still go find, I think, the info line out there if you're looking for it. Won awards for coaching programs from different groups, etc. But fundamentally, it was a passion of mine. I found that coaching was such a differentiator. It's so different in my own story, the difference that it made when I was coached. And I consistently find that when I can coach other people, their story dramatically changes. So I'm passionate about how important coaching is. And to your point, Dave, there's so much out there that's called coaching. It's not coaching. It's something else.
And we'll get into that for sure. And I want to make one distinction at the outset of today's call is that we're not talking about career coaches, like the coach I might hire to help me. That's going to be a separate edition of the expert series. But we're really talking about within your four walls, right? Like what's happening within your company to optimize you and your organization's success, right?
Correct. And I use, let's just say performance coaching and high performance coaching. How do you get high performance coaching? Not just corrective action.
Okay, so I want to start at the basics, the foundational level. So you said a second ago that some stuff's not coaching, some stuff is coaching. So it just from your experience, like what is coaching?
Oh my gosh. It's funny. I had a client once, a very large Fortune 1 retailer, who at one point told me, don't use the word coaching because we only use that for corrective action. When I'm like, but we want to coach people. We want to coach our players. They go, yeah, but we can't use that word. And their culture had hijacked the word. So when people say, let me coach you, they're not trying to help, you. They're trying to like correct you or let me provide some coaching. And then somebody sits down and just starts talking and they're just training. So when I say coaching, I'm very specific about the definition. And this is my definition, but I've talked to like Tony Dungy, Super Bowl winning, football coach. I've talked to pro coaches. I've talked to tons of people. I've talked to executive legends, etc. It's always about bringing the best out of the player. It's not about putting your best in. That's critical. So when we think about coaching, it requires us to really spend time with the player. And that player can be an athlete, that player can be a business leader, that player can be our kids, that are a friend. When we're truly coaching, we're bringing the best out of that player, not putting our best in. I would call that teaching. Teaching is putting your best in. But if I'm going to draw your best out, there's three critical components to that. One is observation, eyes and ears open, mouth closed. And you've got to observe. You've got to literally see what's happening in action. Sports, it's easy because the game starts, the game ends, practices begin, end, etc. Business, it's so much more different because that means I have to show up at a meeting and not talk. I have to let my team run the meeting. And if
Yeah.
I'm coaching a player, I'm there to literally observe. Now, in my coaching practice, I will be brought in on calls and they'll say, hey, my coach is joining us for the call today. He's not going to say anything. He's coaching me. I just want everybody to know he's here to observe me in action. All right, everybody good? Okay, cool. Let's go. Run the meeting. And then afterwards, then I'll provide the second component, which is developmental feedback. Okay, and let's walk through what worked, what didn't work, what you could do differently And usually that's best as a set of questions. What do you think went well? What do you think didn't go well? Because I'm trying to build your self-awareness as a
Yeah.
player, not put my best in. Now, if you're missing something, I'll nudge it. But again, I want that developmental feedback to be based on what I've observed. And then lastly, and just as importantly, is this whole idea of motivation. So
Mm,
I have to tap into that. And here's the hard part. I have a master's in psychology. So it was drilled in my head. I cannot motivate anyone.
mm,
Motivate comes from within. What I can do is demotivate you.
mm,
And here's where it gets really tough for a lot of leaders
yeah.
because I need to observe not only what you're doing and whatever the task or the skill or even the mindset that I'm trying to observe, but I also need to watch your environment because the problem may not be you. It may be something is happening in the environment that's consistently blocking your performance, and I have to go tackle that. Now I have to step out of coach role and into leader mode and go knock that obstacle out of the way or push it to the side enough so that my player can continue to be their best. And that motivation piece, if we don't have really good clarity on how that works, you're just going to give people observation and feedback. And I call that the seagull, right? That's a leader who flies in, poops,
Mm,
and flies away, right? And we've all had those leaders. Hey, Dave, that was a great meeting. Really appreciate what you bring to the team, but I've got some coaching for you. And they give you the feedback, and they leave, and there was no motivational aspect. There was nothing there to help you be your best. And that's where I would start.
And something you said, I think three times, I just want to make sure I'm clear on, is about coaching is not about putting your best in. What does that mean? Because I'm unclear on that.
I think a lot of us, especially high performers who got promoted into leadership roles, want to create clones.
Mm,
We want to put our DNA into people. So we tell them, here, do it this way, think this way, say it this way. And it's very controlling. And early in my career, I took that. I was like that. And to stop and pause and go, you know what? Just because they're different doesn't mean they have to do it the same as you in order to be successful. That's the value of diversity. That's why we bring in all these different flavors and threads into our teams and let that flourish. And if I can draw the best out of somebody who's an introverted, creative, and soft spoken, but a master influencer. Like that's what I want on my team. So we have that, but then that person who's hardworking and very disciplined and will always get things done. I want that on my team too, but I want it done in a way that they're being their authentic selves, not trying to be copies of Tim Ohai, because we don't need that.
mm. And I want to pull a thread if I can. And you made this great is a great metaphor about the seagull coaching. The guy who comes in there, poops on you, and then leaves. And I think we've all been in that situation before and know to your point how demotivating it is. I'm curious, will you talk for a minute about just tactically how that coaching is best done? I think you touched on it for a second there, but I think it's worth kind of pulling that thread a bit of like, again, observed your call, saw some great stuff. However, like I feel like there
Mm.
is a delicate balance of doing it where you're being, forthright and giving really constructive feedback and not pulling punches versus like just pummeling them so hard that they are like they feel just despondent. And so, can you maybe just talk for a few minutes about how that's best delivered, such that it is not demotivating and it is also honest and constructive?
Yeah. Well, so let's pause for a moment, and I want you to literally picture, I'm from Hawaii, so this is easy for me, but I want you to picture sand, just a beachy, sandy space, right? And I want you to draw a line right in the middle. And on the left side, that's your proactive side, and on the right side, that's your reactive side. And what you're talking about really begins with what context? Are we talking about proactive coaching or reactive coaching? Proactive coaching is a lot easier because proactively, you and I agreed that you're going to coach me. Here's what the objectives are. We've got this journey we're on. So when you show up at one of my meetings or you show up at a customer presentation or whatever the thing is, you're there to observe. I know you're there to observe. You're there to check my motivation and make sure I'm not dealing with demotivation. And you're there, I know, to give me feedback.
Yeah.
I'm inviting all of that. Quick point. If you have a player who's not willing to be observed, motivated, and or receive feedback, do not coach them. They're not coachable. They're not willing to do that. That's your gigantic red flag waving.
Yes.
Pull over, pit stop, change. So that proactive thing, you can almost fumble your way through it and it'll still work because I'm inviting that dialogue. Um, and I'll get into how to structure it in a moment, but I want to talk about the reactive. The reactive is the harder part where something happened and you're reacting, or you could call it responsive. Somebody said something they shouldn't have said. Somebody did something they shouldn't have done. You're finally seeing something that you didn't know existed before. You're having an aha moment. How do you make sure that when you now coach that player, again, let's go back. What's the purpose of your talking to them? So begin with number one, check yourself. Is my motivation here to bring their best out, or is my motivation here to put my best in? Is my motivation here to correct and fix and control, or am I trying to serve this person? And you've got to get that first because that will project. That will come out of your face. That will come out of your words. And that first then opens a door to, hey, I start with let's open a context. Let me set up, some connection. How are you doing? What's going on? I want to check with that first, especially if it's a reactive situation. And then I want to ask some questions. Hey, I saw this. Can you tell me what was going on? And double check your observations. And if you're getting completely different answers, go, that's interesting because I saw it a different way. I got feedback from other people that got it a different way. And let that person have their own chance to keep up with you or even catch up to you. Because if you just come in and go straight to sharing the message, that's where you're going to send them sideways. So if you have that emotional connection that's again based on serving, on drawing their best out. I'll even use the word love.
Mhm.
If that's projected, I'm going to psychologically trigger their mirror neurons. They're going to relax and calm. If I trigger mirror neurons with hesitancy and fear without even knowing what we're going to talk about, they're going to get nervous. Then ask those questions. Make sure you saw what you saw. Make sure that and more importantly, make sure they're coming along with you on that journey so that when you share their message, you have the hope that they see what you see, they saw what you saw, they understand it now. They're like, oh, I blew it. I didn't even think about that. Cool. Well, let's talk about what went well. Keep. Let's talk about what didn't go well. Stop. And now let's talk about what can make it even better next time. Start. And that keep, stop, start model is a classic, but the key is you can't just give the feedback. You have to set it up. And then when you finish, then the last thing you do is you lock down the follow through. You lock down, okay, so here's what we're going to do. Here's what's going to happen next. I'm going to find another opportunity to observe you. I want to see this, a similar situation. I expect you to thrive. I expect you to do great things. If you don't, we'll go back and still work on this because this is an opportunity for you to become better. And again, you go back into coaching mode. But this is where a lot of leaders struggle because they're not trying to coach, they're trying to manage.
And I want to clarify something because I'm truly not clear on something you said. This notion of putting your best in versus getting the best out, are those mutually exclusive, or can you give them some stuff with love and with good intention and for their betterment? Are they mutually exclusive or not really?
I call them different hats, right? So I could put my teaching hat and I will teach. And you look at some of the best coaches of all time are teachers. They are. A lot of the coaches, professional coaches, literally started out teaching high school. And they went from teaching into coaching. But then you look at the world's best athletes, they have coaches still.
Sure.
Why? Because they want their best to continue to be brought out as their body changes, as the game changes, as whatever. A master is somebody who truly understands, knows when to coach and then when to shift to teaching and when to mentor. Mentoring is, hey, let me just share a story of what I did. You make your own decision, but here's what I did. And I don't know if that'll help you or not. I think it will. Maybe there's a lesson in there you can apply, but I'm not telling you what to do. So I go, well, teaching is in, coaching is out, and mentoring is with. And if you want to be a master at this stuff, it's literally about, do you have all three hats? And then I'll add the fourth one, which is managing, because sometimes development isn't what needs to be happening right now. This is
Yeah.
about correction, and I either have to manage you up or out.
And something else that I wanted to pull another thread on this
Yeah.
topic because there's so much there to dig into. What you were saying, you come in there as an external party sometimes as a coach, and you're sitting in the room with my meeting and see how I conduct it, and give me feedback. How does the framework you describe differ if I'm just a manager of a person and I'm with you, several hours a day and I'm observing you in meetings, we do ride-alongs. Does that model change at all in terms of how the interaction should go?
Well, so let's go back to the proactive thing. If you're not proactively setting an expectation that part of my job is to coach you, and all you're doing is the reactive stuff or the responsive stuff, you're already off on a what I would call a shaky foundation.
Yeah.
Um, and the second thing is you may not coach everybody all at the same time. You will probably, let's get into coaching strategy a little bit. I use a tool, I call it a 3x3 grid, and I just take skill and will. And I go, look, whoever has low will, regardless of level of skill, you need to coach and coach now.
Mhm.
Figure out what's going on. Why are they demotivated? Why are they not wanting to do this job? Or why are they not enthusiastic about their work? It's often players who've never been coached and they've been ignored and they're frustrated and there's so much environmental stuff that they've lost track of what they can do personally to change the situation and they're just overwhelmed. Coach that first
Mm.
because those players are probably negative on the greater team. Those players are dragging people down. Those are the side conversations that you're not there. It's those low motivation players who are talking like, oh, our company is stupid and blah, 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 blah. Then once you have those players addressed, and again, I'll be very tactical here. It's typically, I say, a 6-month maximum process because it'll take 90 days of real coaching. And I mean, I want to coach you. I don't think you've been coached or I think you need coaching. Here's what I mean by coaching. I want to bring your best out. I'm not trying to shove you down, into the HR, file folder that's sitting under my desk. I'm really trying to help here. Do you want that? And if they're willing to be observed and motivated and receive feedback, begin that journey. In 90 days, I've consistently seen dramatic improvement. Or in
Mm.
90 days, I consistently see dramatic clarity. That person may say they want this stuff, but the reality is they don't really want to receive the feedback, or they don't really want to change their motivation, or they don't really want to be observed. At the end of that 90 days, then you can go to HR and say, I've got a situation. Here's what I've been doing. Here's my documentation and all of
Uh,
that. And now let's formally put this person on a 90-day PIP. And you leave coaching and now you can go to managing. That is the dark path, right? I have done that so many times, more often consistently positive outcomes than negative, including people have raised their hands and says, "You're right. Thanks for the coaching. I'm out. I realize I'm not happy here. I need to go find another job." And I go, "Cool, go find another
yeah.
job." I support that. I'll happy to use me as a reference because I think you do great work when you're motivated to do that great work. I'm thinking of one guy in particular right now that I worked with, and I was like, he just didn't like the company, and it was like he needed to go, and he went on to do great things afterwards. Then from there, let's say you've got those that what I call the crisis situations off your team. You're now in a situation, there are no red lights on your dashboard. It's just green and yellow. So, okay, now where do I coach next? I think, and I have seen consistently high performance come, and from my own experience, you go after the highest performers next, which is counterintuitive.
Mhm.
But you go after the highest performers first and you go, how do I get more out of you? And it's not always more performance. Actually, what I find is I will coach you into becoming a peer coach. I'll coach you into becoming somebody who elevates the people around you because now that's what a true champion is. A true champion is somebody who steps on that tennis court or steps on that and they elevate their partner. They elevate the people on their team. They just bring everybody else up, not just the lone wolf out there, collecting President's Club trophies.
Sure.
So that person, I'll give them one of my yellow lights to work with. One. And it's going to be working on skill or will, not both. And then I'll coach that coaching. I'll want to sit in on them coaching somebody. I'd like to sit in with you. And then once that's done, you start seeing not only is that strong player either thriving under your coaching or ready to promote or even to replace you so you can step into another role on another team. Nothing but healthy outcomes happen in that scenario. And then the time you have, you finish with the yellows who aren't being as successful in their outcomes, and they need your help. And so then you go out, but now you've got time to do it all, and everybody's been coached on your team.
As a completely side note, you mentioned earlier on, ask them, are you willing to be coached? Have you ever had people say like, actually, like, I'm good, thanks, and push
Oh
you away?
yeah.
How does that go?
Not well for them. I'm neutral, right? So that's a big part of this. Part of my mindset I've learned is I have to be neutral first. If I'm going to come in, it's not about me being in control. It's not about me being successful. It's not about me being even, significant and like, oh, you're the boss, whatever, you're the coach. It's really about here. I'm here to serve. And if I'm here to serve and you're like, I don't want to be served, okay, then the coaching path is closed. And now what path is available? Well, usually the management one. So now I'll let management step in, or I am the manager and I'll do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes the high performers are like, just don't get in my way because I'm all good.
You
Um,
know what though? The highest performers are the ones who have the mindset they're constantly learning.
well, that's
And
why
they're
they're high
and
performers.
yeah, exactly. They're the ones who want the oh my gosh, no one ever comes out with me. I'd love, they want to shine. They want to go, but they're always like, what did I do? What can I do better? What can I go? Well, let's pause. What went well? Well, this. And I go, yeah, but also this. Okay. What didn't go well? I blew this up. Actually, I didn't notice it. If you felt like that's something that wasn't good, that's on you. But I I I think it went great. Well, what can I do better? Let's talk that through. Let's brainstorm that. Now that person not only is elevating their game, they're very intentional about it, but more importantly, you're probably learning some best practices. You're probably learning things that you can go take back to the yellows and either share, or you can spark that inspiration in that high performer and say, "Hey, would you coach that on, you know, Julie on our team because she's struggling with that, and I think you'd be the perfect person to come alongside." But the key is, I want you to coach her. What? I want you to bring her best out. I don't want you to put your best in. And you start changing the culture.
And to your point from before, just remember the top athletes in the world all have coaches. And so
100%.
you may be the best performer in President's Club year after year, but it doesn't mean you can't get better. And so I think it's a good reminder that all the best are the best and they have coaches. And so I think it's a good reminder. Something I think we've touched on, but I want to hit it head on because I feel like it's pretty important, is the biggest mistakes made coaching. So I get the idea of like wearing the different hats, but I want to make sure I get total clarity and depth on this because I feel like, as we said much earlier, there's a lot of coaching happening, but not all of it's good. And so can we just kind of go really deep for a few minutes on just what mistakes people typically make on coaching?
Yeah. So first of all, the biggest one is we've talked about is overusing that word, right? So it's not just correcting people. It's not just, and I'll even go after scheduled performance reviews. We call them coaching one-to-ones. There's no true observations to leverage. You can't go into a meeting that's called a coaching one-to-one for performance enhancement. And if you don't have any live observations or they're from 6 months ago,
Hmm.
you're not coaching. Now you're blind, right? You're trying to provide feedback and maybe motivation, but if there's not, again, you're not coaching. So those are the biggest mistakes. But I think the other big piece that comes into play here is, and this is one I would say, I'll run ahead a little bit to like senior leaders who want to drive coaching into their business. I go, coaching will not work. And it took me years and years and years because I was like the biggest coaching, fanatic. I'm like, we need to coach. We need to coach. Coaching's the game changer. It took me years. And as I reached higher altitudes of responsibility, I realized if there's no clarity and there's no empowerment for the organization, coaching will not work.
Hmm.
So let me break that down. I opened that I work a lot on strategic execution, and I picked that because I had the realization, the aha moment that a lot of coaching efforts that I was being brought in to help initiate or sponsor or be a part of or support, the success factor boiled down to Was clarity on the strategy already there? Did people clearly understand the scope of their strategy, the priorities, and they all operate with the same priorities? And did they have goal and role alignment? Because if I break any one of those, nobody's executing. Everybody's doing their own thing, running around in circles. But equally important, if I make all the expectations super, super clear, but I don't empower people to meet them, try to coach in that environment.
Mm.
Hello, pick any sports team. Any those of you who have long-suffering fandoms with teams who have never won the championship, and your team consistently is horrible, it's almost always because they've lacked clarity and or empowerment to be super successful.
And I'm going to stop you for half a second here. Can you take that concept of the clarity and empowerment and just give like a real world example of what you've seen, like how that looks in corporate
Yeah,
America?
yeah. Um, uh, Former employer, I won't say who, but you can go look at who I worked for. Had a massive shift, had acquired some smaller product companies to put into the portfolio to try and build this broader value offering to the market, and it just wasn't hitting the financial numbers that they had been projected to. So the strategy was land and expand. We're just going to push these smaller, easy, low ticket items that we bought into the conversation, and we'll work that into expanding into it. Okay, I get that. That makes sense logically. But it launched before it was staffed. It launched before all the numbers were finalized outside of the high level ones. It launched before the training was all put in place. It launched before the data systems had been updated to, there was no empowerment. So what you wound up having was situations where people were put on these teams or in charge of these teams. They had no empowerment to succeed. And so literally month after month after month, while the drag, I remember very specifically sitting in EMEA and Europe, the head of HR for Europe wasn't even prepared for the recruiting that was going to be involved.
Mm.
And we're 3 months before launch. And you and I know, I mean, you especially know how long it takes for a recruiting cycle to work to get not only people loaded up for the interview prep, but to run the interview process, background checks, everything else, final offers, who says yes, who says no, how do you start over again, go find somebody else. Um, it was brutal. And yet, on day one, the number was the number. So the head of that group for EMEA was like, "You better hit it." And same for Asia and Asia Pacific, and same for North America. You better go hit your numbers. I'm like, that's all the clarity in the world, but there's no empowerment to meet it. And so then you try to coach people up. It was until what was interesting is as I got involved with these leaders to help them, as they got empowerment, the coaching started to take off. But until they got the empowerment, the coaching was static at best.
Mm. Got it. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you for that. And going back to best practices and doing it right. So I'm going to go with the assumption that coaching is best delivered one-on-one. Right. So I think that's foundational. So talking about that, but then how does that scale? Because obviously it doesn't scale when it's like a one to only a couple people. So
Yeah,
there's got to be scale, whether it's automation or tools. Like how do you scale this concept of coaching effectively?
right. So let's take away coaching for a moment and let's use the components instead. How do you get the best out of players using observation, motivation, and developmental feedback? How do you do that? And can you do that in large groups? Not really, because the feedback can't be specific for a group
Yeah.
unless you're talking to a team, but that's not true performance coaching, high performance coaching. You've got to have it one to one. And that's why I say it's so critical to have a team strategy. Then now you're into how large is my team? Like if I'm one person, I got 20 people, how much coaching am I really going to be able to do? right? So you've not been set up for success to begin with. Again, that clarity and empowerment piece. It's like, we want you to go coach everybody. Yeah, but you've given me 20 SDRs to go manage, and it's a numbers game, and I can't even keep up to listening to their calls. That right off the bat is critical. So you have to have one-to-one, and your teams have to be structured in a way that you have the ability to have those conversations at least one a month. And then you'll probably go deeper more than once a month with those players, as we talked about, the red, the green, and the yellow lights on your dashboard. To scale that, everybody's talking about AI right now, AI coaching and AI. And I'm like, it's a wonderful dream. It would be amazing. And I play hard with my Chat GPT. I've renamed it Bill. I got tired of saying, "Hey Chat GPT." I just go, "Hey Bill," and he goes, "Hey Tim, what's up?" And we chat all the time, and I'm testing and I'm trying to work with it, and it's a wonderful peer. It's a wonderful peer. I can generate some great discussions and thoughts while I drive in my car. I go on voice mode, and we're just having full conversations. With that said, can AI be the scalable magic pixie dust that we're all hoping it will be? Well, let me ask you, is AI designed, or can it learn how to bring your best out? Possibly. It could certainly be we'll call it a low level coach. Can it observe? Yes, and it does now. Can it motivate? Ooh, only if you program the demotivations into it so that it's looking at the environment and say, you're dealing with task difficulty. You're dealing with isolation and you've been left alone. You've got information overload. Let me help you with that. Unless it knows how to do that, it's going to give you rah, you can do it stuff, but not actual deal with the demotivation that's getting in the way. And the last piece is that developmental feedback. Keep, stop, start. Can it tell you what you did wrong? Can it tell you what you did right? Can it tell you how to make it better? All of I don't know. I still, my landing on AI is this. It's very good at left brain. It's still, it's almost non-existent. It fakes the right brain stuff.
I'll add because I'm also knee deep into AI, like really deep into it, and how it can give feedback. And my observation is it can give very good feedback on tactical things. Your pitch wasn't good here. Your story fell flat here. The example you gave was not appropriate for this client. Like those are very tactical things, and I think is very insightful, quite brilliant at doing some of that stuff and telling it what to do. So I think that it takes you pretty far down the field, and I think it's a great tool for self coaching. Hey, I'm going to do this. Give me some feedback on this. I think it's a
Yeah.
great way to kind of like practice in the backyard, so to speak. Like it's good for that. But I think there is higher level stuff and what you're alluding to, more of the kind of the right brain stuff, I think, where essentially it's sort of like it's getting you motivated, it's getting you to try and to want and to strive. And I think there's the differences there. And I think both should coexist. I think they coexist quite nicely. And I think I wouldn't be the company who's all of one or one or the other. I think there's a hybrid approach, a blended approach that is really powerful when done right.
Yeah, I agree with that, Dave. I would go so far as to say, I think AI could be a great teacher. I don't know if it could be a great coach. I can put the best in. It can literally scrape, here's, hey, by the way, did you know this is our best practice at the company? Have you considered this? Da 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 da. It can walk you through teaching and it can put the best in, but for it to pause, to process, to analyze, to read your face, to look at your body language, just go, you're not buying this. You're not listening to me. That AI is not there at all. And I think we've got a long ways to go before it will be, if ever. But at the same time, if you're not augmenting what you're doing with AI, I'll put it to you this way: can AI become a great peer coach or a great member of the coaching team? 100% yes. If I'm using AI, go tell me what I'm not seeing. Go observe the data. Go observe show me some data that I haven't been privy to or haven't paid attention to. Bring that into my coaching conversation. How would you do that? Thank you. Now I will take that into my one-to-one with my player. And I say, hey, I'm noticing this in your pipeline performance, or I'm noticing this in the execution of that project, or I'm noticing this in your meeting communications. Let's talk about that because AI was able to find it. Otherwise, I would have missed it.
I agree. And one of the things that I think I've observed in the past, like I used to watch reps record their pitches, and like here, I'm going to give my elevator pitch or
Yeah.
my or customer
Yeah.
story, whatever it is, and then their manager would log in, watch their pitch asynchronously, and give feedback. And one of my big observations was the coaches were giving weak or very poor feedback on the reps. I'm curious your thoughts on coaching the coaches and giving how do we make them be better coaches to their reps?
That's so important. Again, let's go back to the foundational stuff. Make sure that you're actually expecting them to coach, and your definition of coaching is what you're trying to, let's say, multiply.
Mhm.
And number two, make sure that when you're working with these coaches, you're practicing it yourself. You're observing them coaching. You're not observing them selling or them running a meeting or doing
Yeah.
something that isn't coaching. You want to observe the coach doing the coaching job. When you do that, oh my gosh, I worked with I will say this, Shell Oil years ago. That's where I learned all this stuff because they were so good at it.
Yeah.
We watched sales take off. We watched our bench strength of talent take off because the general manager for one of the major North American businesses was like, I'm all in on coaching. We're going to do this. And he himself, he was a general manager. He had his VP, kind of head of ops doing this, and his head of sales doing this. Everybody, he was pulling in finance. He was pulling in engineering and other groups to say, hey, come in and coach our players when you have a chance on a joint sales call, and making sure they were part of coaching training, so that literally there was a coaching dynamic as a common thread through every customer interaction. So the customer interactions were all getting better and better because the leadership at the very top was bought in on this. And then literally every quarterly business review as a team, we'd go through, everybody have to pull, there was a whole section in the agenda on your coaching activity. Who'd you meet with? What'd you talk about? How are they doing? What's going on? And it wasn't like putting you under a microscope to see if you're failing. It was, hey, are you doing anything that the group would benefit from hearing about? Are you doing anything that I could help if you're running into, and the leader was looking for demotivation that was getting in the way of his coach's coaching. And then he would send me out to go, I want you to go with them, go to their meeting, go join them, watch them coach, and then sit down. And we'd have conversations afterward. And I'd be dealing with these people with higher job grades than me at the time. And I'd be coaching them, and they're like, "Man, I didn't even see that. Thank you so much." I'm like, "Cool." It was fantastic when you saw that come to life. But again, the clarity and the empowerment were there. That GM was so clear on what the business strategy was and was not. Had everybody chasing the same priorities, total alignment, like I said, cross-functionally. So you had finance and engineering and all these other groups, HR, all aligned on what success looked like and paddling in the same direction. And then it was absolutely empowered. It was like, what do you need? How can we help you? And again, they were making money. So that leader was reinvesting. It's like, this is just proof. So when somebody came, another GM for a larger part of the business came and said, how are you doing? And he goes, it's coaching. All right, you need Tim Ohai. So I go to that meeting, and I'm in this North American leaders meeting, and I'm being introduced. Some of the people I knew already because I had actually come out of that part of the business. But I never forget, one of the leaders in the room goes, how do we know coaching's really that good? How do we know coaching really makes that much of a difference? And I'll never forget the main leader's name. His name was Doug. Doug just goes, it doesn't matter. Larry, the GM of the other team, believes it's true. Therefore it is.
Hmm.
So I want to know if you're going to believe it's true or not, because we need what they had. We want what they have. And that changed their bits. It was just so all the psychological stuff, these neurons bump against each other between people, and magic starts to happen. But it doesn't just happen just because you want it to, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah. And going back to what I was saying before, like I used to see feedback that was like great job or knocked it out of the park. And it becomes cringeworthy because that is,
Yeah.
you're trying to motivate them, make them feel good and give good feedback, but it's so non-specific, it does nothing. It completely like it's calorie free. It's like water. And so
Yeah.
it does nothing for them. So I think there's so much to be said about how do you get the coaches to be better coaches of the people. And I think and that's when all ships start to rise. It's a really powerful thing. I think the last topic I want to go deep on is, and we've touched on technology and AI a little bit, but what do you see as the future of coaching? Like how does this thing grow, evolve, change over time?
It's all gonna go back in my mind to those three components. Will technology help us observe better? Will it help us motivate better, or at least identify what's demotivating better? And will it help us provide better feedback? And if tech can do that, and I believe it can, um, you will see powerful performance enhancements. Look at sports teams that are using data to change. I mean, Moneyball was all about how
Yeah.
data and analytics transformed how they coached, literally how they coached. And I know in the movie, the manager for the Oakland A's, Art Howe, was projected as being hesitant and resistant. In reality, he wasn't. He was far more. I was in Oakland at the time, so he was far more embracing of the idea. But the idea was, how do we allow this information to augment what we're doing, most importantly, without overtaking it? There's a great article I just actually shared today on LinkedIn about the fall of Nike. And
Mm.
Nike went all in on data driven, and their share price has tumbled, their business has tumbled, they have lost their luster. And they were saying basically, they were letting business math drive everything. I'm going to tell you right now, to be great at business requires business mathematics and psychological truths. And the psychological truths will overrule business mathematics every single time. So the future of coaching is technology that helps us observe better. And so recording calls and analyzing and all of that stuff and turning that into more manageable information is one thing, but also I want to observe your context. I want to look at macro data in the system. I want to look at pipeline dynamics. I want to look at, so for example, one of my people on a previous company, I hired an analytics person because I'm like, we have to be data driven in how we do this stuff around enablement. And we had, long story short, discovered that pipeline erosion cut in half whenever the sales rep had an early stage one discussion around what the roles and responsibilities were going to be for that sales journey.
Hmm.
So let me explain how we'll want to engage you. We'll need to be talking to these stakeholders. We'll be bringing in these stakeholders. We'll need access to this data. And that was all as part of our discovery. Here's what discovery looks like. Here's how we would like to present that value. Here's how we would like to talk to you. Just all of that up front cut their pipeline erosion in half. Imagine having AI driven data analytics to say, here's some macro stuff. Go look at your team and see how many of your people are having those conversations early stage.
Yeah.
Now I can be very focused on what I coach, when I coach, how I coach for my team's performance. Same thing applies to the motivational dynamics. If data can be brought to me that shows me everybody's dealing with demotivation right now, here's specifically what it is, what's going on. Now I can go either go talk to them about it, or I can go try and fight the battles I need to internally to get resources. And then lastly, the feedback can get better. But again, the feedback is going to be more driven by that human to human interaction,
Yeah.
not just the data saying you should do better to hit a certain benchmark number. That never really seems to work, because there's a lot of teams that went all in on data and have lost everything as a result.
Yeah, I think the biggest value that I'm seeing right now is just the ability to be on every call and bubble up observations to the rep and the manager. Then something needs to be done with those observations. But I think just the ability to be this ubiquitous big brother, eye seeing everything, it's really powerful, and it can help distill down what's worth checking into and watching and what's not. And so I think there's some real value in that. This has been interesting and I think a lot of ways eye opening. I'm curious. So what are your big takeaways? I think just sort of like if you're leading people with kind of a final thought in terms
Mm.
of coaching, what do you like, what's your headline?
Um, if I don't know if I give it one sentence, but I will say a couple. Number one, make sure your coaching is actually coaching. It's bringing the best out through observation, motivation, and feedback. And number two, make sure that you have clarity and empowerment locked in first before you start pushing hard on coaching. Otherwise, your efforts will fail.
I love that. Tim, thank you for sharing your expertise, all that stuff. It's always fun chatting with you. And I hope the folks listening really internalize this discussion and understand the importance of coaching and doing it right. And I think those are two different things. And so thank you for sharing all that stuff. And please be well.
It's been an honor. And Dave, I want to give a shout out to you. You serve the enablement community so well and so consistently for so long. It's an honor to be a guest on your podcast. And also, Dave, thank you for what you do and how you serve.
Thank you. It is truly my pleasure. I work with great people, which makes it very fun. All right. Thanks, everybody. Tim.